You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
Crank up that engine. Ride into the night. Get ready for adventures that will give you a fright. Just enough of the ghostly to give you the chills. Just enough weird to feel the thrill. Hotrod Paranormal with your host, John Healea.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining in tonight. Happy Wednesday. We're going to have a great show, a really interesting show. And, oh, my goodness, my guest has such a, and we're going to go over this and just so many experiences, and I'm really happy to have him on. And I got to say, very interesting, man. This guy has been through, oh, my goodness, everything. The life's worst things that could have been thrown at him, and he brought himself up through it, and he's going to share a lot of that. But my guest is Bill Bean, and Bill's a internationally known author, a deliverance minister, an exorcist, life coach, public speaker with over 30 years in the paranormal field. And he's been on countless shows and over, oh God, he says now I think it might be 2,000 interviews. So Bill's lived through like many events, like I was saying, and extreme paranormal demonic activity with oppression, as well as his family members. And he's just really has a story that you know, he came out of this and is doing a lot of good for a lot of people. So I want to bring him on now. And I want to welcome to the show, Bill Bean. Bill, are you there?
I am here. Thank you so much, John. It's great to be on with you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And like I kind of briefly said, that you had a story that I mean, your parents had the American dream. And I'm going to let you tell your story. I just want to share this little bit introduction. But your parents had the American dream and you know, coming into this home, and they buy a home that gonna fix up. Your dad's a carpenter and just really has a lot of skills, and so you guys find this home and this fixer upper, and man, it changed your life, and it changed it forever. And that's what if we can touch on that, and then we'll go into later on about your books and your different things that you're a part of, and we definitely want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and it's always good to start from the start, even though it's not pleasant to talk about it, but it is what it is. I mean, these events actually took place, and I thank God and praise Him for saving me and for the calling that He's put on my life now. And we talked before, coming on live, that, I've accepted that this was part of my journey. And we all have a journey in life. And I could not be where I'm at right now in helping people had I not been there. So it was a necessary part of the journey for me to experience a variety of paranormal, supernatural experiences in order to be able to relate to people now. And I say, I've written 4 books now. And in the first book, Dark Force, I say that it all began in 1970 when my family and I moved into that house. But it really goes much further back. John, I discovered after writing the book that through a relative that some family members whom I don't even know and my mother didn't know either, many, many, many years ago, actually conjured up these demonic forces. And so they came upon the family and created a variety of damage. And I found out that my mother and her siblings, had many paranormal, supernatural experiences in their childhoods. And I also found out that my mother had actually lived in the area where that house was located at one point in her teen years. And so she had, a prior exposure to the area. So I think that, in looking back on the whole thing, certainly after discovering, more of this information and being informed on this, I think we were in the perfect storm of evil. Yes, evil was present and manifest in that home and in the area, and still is to this day. I've been back to the area several times as a deliverance minister / exorcist to help other families in the area. But, that said, we also had this evil attached to the family because of those family members who actually conjured up those demonic forces. So it was 2 factors in this, and we were caught in the middle of this perfect storm, and that's why it was so severe for my family and I. And the house was located in Glen Burnie, Maryland, in an area called Herondale. And I was 4 years old when we moved in, and my first recollections were the first time I saw it, I knew something was wrong. It just didn't, my sister was 13 at the time, and she said she felt the same way, that it just did not feel good, and the house was semi-dilapidated. Again, my dad was a master carpenter, and he saw it as a restoration project, which he ended up doing quite a bit of work, in restoration to the house and made it look much, much better. But I just knew from the very beginning, it just had this very ominous look and feel about it. And equally so on the inside. So you would, again, now just paint a picture here. The house is located at the bottom of this circle, this downhill cul-de-sac, had a very large and deep ravine located behind it. And you would walk in through the front door, and the walls had this dark brown paneling on it, almost black in color. So it was very dark inside of the house. And even on the brightest of days, it was still dark inside of that house. So it had this, when we know that evil is present, there are indicators. And a couple of the indicators are atmospheric pressure.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling of pressure in the head or the ears, and we also, as human beings, we operate on frequency and vibration, and so we can feel that frequency and vibration, and so you couple that with the atmospheric changes that may be present or taking place, whether that suddenly the room has gone very cold or whatever it may be, disturbances in the air, you, and really any person, if their eyes are open and awake and tuned in, really have the capability to sense when anything supernatural is present. And so that's what was taking place in the house. And again, you would walk in through the front door into the living room. To the right was a long and dark hallway. And again, just picture dark brown paneling on the walls. And it was a hard tile floor. And my brother and I shared the first room on the right. My parents shared the second room on the right. My sister had the last room on the left across the hallway. And that room is the room where again, looking back on it, I feel that was the main portal in the house. The room was always very cold. And that is also the room where my sister's door, the bedroom door, would open and slam for many repetitions at a time. And my mother was the first to have a physical, or actually any type of supernatural encounter. My sister was actually the first to have a physical encounter. But my mother had this supernatural encounter not long after we moved in. She was by herself in the living room. She was unpacking boxes. My dad had taken us with him for the day. I have, again, an older sister, Patty, younger brother, Bobby, and left my mother, Patricia, being alone in the house. He had taken us with him to his parents' house, my grandparents' house, for the day, to allow my mother to have time and space without us being a distraction to her while she unpacked and organized in the house. And it was during the course of this that she felt a presence come into the room. And in her mind, she thought that was my dad sneaking back in to play a joke on her. And she spun around, fully anticipating on seeing him. And to her shock, nothing was there. So, as you can imagine, she was unnerved and taken aback by it, and was eventually able to collect herself and go back to doing what she was doing. And then shortly after that, my sister's bedroom door slammed shut by itself, and that was enough to make her go outside and wait until we returned. So that's where it began. And then it continued on, with these noises and feelings of presence, TVs turning on and off by themselves. And back then, the TV sets were totally different. You had these big, heavy types of console televisions, and you would have to press a button in, and then there wasn't a remote control, so you had these heavy channel selectors,
right?
And you would have to, it would take some effort to turn that channel selector to change the channels, which back then you only had 3 channels, and isn't that amazing? And so something would turn the TV on and then effortlessly flip that channel selector, that heavy channel selector dial. Many, many times that happened. And there were also times and instances to where you would have these horrible odors manifest, smelling sulfur or rotted meat or something like that. Just, terrible, terrible odors. And you would hear taps on the walls, like somebody was taking a finger and flicking it against the walls. And then there were times that it sounded like there were pounding noises coming from within the walls and on the walls at times. Water faucets would turn on by themselves, and so much pressure would come out of the sinks in the bathroom and the kitchen that it would empty out of the sinks. It would, come out of the sinks and saturate areas around it. There were times that my mother would make the beds in the mornings and would come back, a short time later to discover the beds torn apart. And so this is just, we're not even, this is the tip of the iceberg. We're just scratching the surface here. The amount of events that took place in that house and over that time period is unfathomable.
Well, and also your mom, like most people in that generation, I'm a little bit older than you, but I know back in those days, and people were fortunate they were able to that the mom stayed home and tended the house, and the dad was the hardworking guy and trying to provide for the family. So your mom spent a lot of time in that house. Now you had a Now, did you just have the one dog at
Well,
that
we had
time?
several dogs over the course of, at that time, but,
Yeah,
we
at
had
that
several
time.
dogs and cats over the years of being in there, and they were all affected in one way or another.
I was going to say, now, I know back in that day, too, that, if you had something that was, odd, paranormal type sorts, I mean, people didn't talk about it, and it just wasn't something that you
Exactly.
spoke about. But did your mom
People
ever
were
mention?
embarrassed by it. My mother was embarrassed and ashamed. My dad didn't want to talk about it at all. You did not talk about these types of things back then because people would think you were crazy. There were no paranormal groups or anything like that. The only people out back then, were people like the Warrens, and they were, an anomaly. They were, just that these were, nobody knew who these people were, and nobody would, most people wouldn't dare to call them or anybody like them.
Well, yeah,
And go ahead.
and I'm sorry, and that would be like, so if your mom, I'm just imagining, your mom's doing her thing all day and getting the house ready and getting the meals ready and making sure you guys are good and everything, and you're coming home from school and all that, and she's catching your dad and saying, hey, this happened, or I heard this and that. I mean, he's probably excited. He's tired for one thing, coming home, and then another thing, he's excited because it's a new house, and he's able to, depending on finances, able to fix up the house the way that you guys want it or you envision it. And so he probably dismissed a lot of that, like, the house is settling, or, oh, don't worry about it, and things like that. I'm just imagining if there was conversations like that. Have you ever had that or had heard that, from your parents talking at the dinner table or anything like that?
No, but my dad did confide in my mother's mother at one point, saying that he was having experiences. And then I found out recently that something that I didn't know from my brother is that there were times that I would go and spend the night or weekend at my grandmother's house. My mother's mother, was very close with her, and she and my step-grandfather lived about a mile away in a one-bedroom apartment. And I would go and, spend weekends there sometimes. And it just happens that on this particular night or weekend in question, which I never knew about until my brother recently told me about this, he doesn't like to talk about these things. A lot of times when people endure this type of trauma, they just shut down. They can't talk about stuff like this. It's very, very difficult to bring it up, and it's just so painful, and he happens to be one of those types of people. And yet on this one occasion recently, he began to tell me some things that I didn't know because I wasn't there at the time. And so many things happened. Had I known, some of these things I'd probably forgotten about, but this I guarantee I wouldn't have forgotten about. He told me that on one occasion, my dad had come in and was in a drunken stupor, and an unseen force actually grabbed him by his throat and lifted him in the air and threw him through a set of double doors in the living room closet. And I never knew about that story until, my brother recently, he was there, he saw it, and just amazing, because my father was a very powerful individual. He was very stockily built. He was a man's man, very rugged and tough individual. And, wasn't afraid of anyone or anything. And so for something like that to have taken place, it must have shaken him to his core, because he was a man that he was used to being in control of every situation. And, I'm sure it had to be just horrible for him to find himself in a situation that he had no control over. And furthermore, John, looking back on this, I really believe that led him to really try to escape reality. And he started to, my parents were social drinkers back then, and they had, in the beginning, they had parties and gatherings and things like that. People would come over for the holidays and stuff like that. But, it didn't last for long, that's for sure. The more the activity increased, the less other family members came around. And so the social drinking for my dad escalated, as this activity increased and intensified and became more prominent and prevalent. My dad's drinking escalated, and he ended up becoming a raging alcoholic who began to physically abused my mother on a regular basis between 1973 and 1975. It was horrific, and there were times that he was absolutely just killing my mother. And I, can recall being 8 years old, having to run to a neighbor's house to get the police call on my father. Just horrific memories. And again, looking back on it, I have no doubt that while under the influence of alcohol, these demonic entities were literally able to fuel his rage and intensify everything, the violence towards my mother. And this is, something that I caution people against, today as a minister. I warn people about the dangers of being under the influence of alcohol and or a drug, because it lowers the frequency and vibration. If we human beings, which I totally believe that we do, operate on frequency and vibration, when we're under the influence of something like that, our frequency and vibration is lowered to the point to where we are wide open for a demonic attack, because the devil's there. He's in those lower frequencies and vibrations, and his demons are right there. And when a person does something to, put themselves in that area, they are wide open for attack. So I caution people against these things all the time. And again, I'm a living witness to have unfortunately seen some horrific, things due to being under the influence of alcohol.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm absolutely right behind you with that as we have that vibration. And I think when that lowers down, we are vulnerable to, negative energy, which also can bring in that demonic and the possession and take over your mind and have negative thoughts.
No question about it.
Absolutely.
No question.
And I had read this, and I know this is a little bit off what we were just talking about with your family home, but and what your thoughts is on this is I had read now that 30% of the world's population is possessed, and 50% are affected by a negative energy, a negative spirit. And some people don't catch up on it because of they're not in tune, or they just brush it off as bad luck. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to be winning the lottery and happy-go-lucky. We're going to have different challenges in our life. But I just thought, I had read that, and I thought, man, you're coming on, and just kind of what your thoughts are with so much things that are out there, people that have with them baggage, energy that's with them that they have that they don't even know. And, I just thought that was an interesting statistic on that.
Yeah, and I agree with it. I would change the wording, though, on, that percentage. What was it, 50%, did you say?
I had read that it was 30%, and that's
30%. Okay.
Yeah, and in a few
and
articles,
I would call it an oppression. I wouldn't call it a possession, because a very small amount of people become fully demonically possessed. But I would call it under the influence of a demonic oppression, which can lead to possession. There's a reason for this, because of the times we're in right now, because of the technology that is present and manifest, the things that are here and the things that are right around the corner. There's a reason for all of this. Believe me, the more technologically advanced we become as a people, the worse off we are. And the devil knows this, and the devil's always in the details, and he is right there, eyeball deep in the technological aspects of this, because when AI enters into this, artificial intelligence, that's exactly what it is. It's the devil and his demons. And so with devices such as CERN, and let me say this, I've never been there. I've researched quite a bit about it. I have never been there. I don't know what's really going on. I haven't seen it for myself. But based on what I've researched, what I've studied about over the last couple of years, I certainly believe that it's a strong possibility that this CERN device is not good. It's not for the betterment of mankind. And it is opening portals and stargates and all these dimensional doorways, which is loosing more and more demons on the earth. And it is working in conjunction with something called D-Wave quantum computers. And same thing here. You're talking about relying on and utilizing artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something like this, you are on a slippery slope, and that's where we are right now. And so I believe that these D-Wave quantum computers work in concert with the CERN device. And I absolutely do believe that portals and doorways are being opened up, and this is why so many people are being affected by demonic forces. You just wouldn't believe it, John, the amount of people that contact me for help worldwide. I just helped a man yesterday in Denmark. I've helped people from all over the world, and it continues, and there is no shortage of people contacting me for help. And it will continue. The more we progress on this path, the busier I'm going to get for sure. And so I caution people against these things. And again, if there's nothing to this, if everything I've just said is a lie, is false, then how come if you go on the CERN website, how come the logo is 3 interlocking 6s?
Mm-hmm.
Why is the thing outside of their headquarters, Shiva the Destroyer? Why is there a statue to Shiva the Destroyer right there on their grounds? I mean, so if there's nothing nefarious going on here, then why would you have these types of things associated with what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
So, another thing that I talk a lot about is the Mandela effect and the changes in the Bible and other changes as well. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to scare people, and I'm certainly not trying to tell people to lead them away from God and tell them that the Bible is no longer true and don't read it anymore. I've never said anything like that. As a matter of fact, what I try to do is reinforce people's faith in that as long as we have a strong connection with God, and if we're keeping Him first, then He will protect us, and He'll bless us, and He'll keep us safe from all these things that are here and all these things that are coming. But it's going to require people to make their strong connection with God and to have that type of faith, what I call warrior mode, walking in faith, strength, and courage, and God will have great favor and honor on that. But there is a concerted effort, and it's whether it's through media or movies or TV or music or wherever it may be, there is a concerted effort on this planet to lead as many people away from God as possible. And that's what we're in right now, and it is very, very important for people to wake up and realize this before it's too late.
Well, absolutely, and I know I don't want to get too far off on that because I'm going to have you back on
That'll be another show.
Second show. I'm telling you, Bill, I got just papers and papers of just questions. One question turns into 3 questions. So I don't know if you've ever been someone has ever told you that, but with you, it's just very interesting. And man, I have so much to ask you, and I know we're not going to have that much time, but
ask away, brother.
And I'm going to give you an example and I'm not going to go into real detail, but even the football player would kneel and not doing the kneeling now because of the flag situation, people that are again protesting, but someone that was kneeling, thanking God and living in that moment. I mean, that guy was scrutinized in the media in the football world. It was like, well, how dare he pray on the field?
Isn't that amazing? And yet, that's it. You have that man crucified, and I remember that, Tim Tebow. I remember that.
Yeah.
But now these players can, kneel during the national anthem, and that's okay. So see, this is what I mean. Everything is reversed. So when you see things, and it goes back to the scripture, woe to them that call evil good and good evil. So I mean, when you see this type of trend and you see these things happening, you know that the devil is in the details because he's a mocker of God and he does everything in reverse. So our God is a God of order. There's an order to all things, and it starts with God. But the devil is the corrupter. He's a liar, and he tries to rearrange these things and reverse them because it's all a mock of God. So, we see a lot of things, and that was a very good thing you brought up right there. And I'm sorry to say, now look, I was an athlete, and I say in dark forest that, my escape, my temporary escape from all of this was through sports. I was a very, very good athlete in many different sports. And boy, that was my sanctuary to be able to, for a little while, escape the things that were taking place in that house. So I was always the first guy on the field and the last one to leave because I didn't want to go home, after the games were over. And so now, again, that said, we see that it's just absolutely amazing what's taking place, and not with just football, but other sports as well. And I'm sorry to say that I no longer watch the NFL. I didn't watch one NFL game this year, including the Illuminati Bowl. I won't watch it. I wash my hands of it. And if I see any trends like that taking place, in baseball, I'll never watch another baseball game or anything else. I mean, I really feel, John, I'm sad to say this, but again, it goes back to another scripture, for the love of money is the root of all evil, and that's what we're seeing now. Money has ruined professional sports, and it is all about money and power, and there truly is an Illuminati, and they are of the seed of the devil. They are the tares that are mentioned in the Bible, the wheat and the tares mixed together. They are the tares. They know who they are, and they know what they're doing, and they very much have an agenda. And a lot of the populace are really just mind-conditioned and enslaved to these things that take place, and they just go along with anything that comes along, and it's very, very sad to see.
It is, and that trend, like you said, if you can jump up and jump in the crowd and swear and throw your hands up and act a fool, that's what they want. But if you bow down and just in silence and put your head down and you're horrible. So I don't get that. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, all we have to do is step outside of that and examine it for a minute and say, okay, why is this? Why would this be happening? And why are people just going along with this like it's no big deal? Well, we know the devil is in the details every time because he is the great deceiver and he is the great distorter. I'll give you another, for instance. There was a story that I saw yesterday, and I posted it on my social media. I just couldn't believe it. We have come so far down as a society that the story came out of Las Vegas. I think it was a couple of nights ago. This woman, she was all messed up, I guess, under the influence of alcohol or whatever. And she's passed out on the sidewalk right there on the city street, right there where all the casinos are and everything. And she's laying there, and this guy, and there are people everywhere, John. They're standing everywhere, and he gets on top of her and starts assaulting her sexually. And people are standing there. Nobody pulled this guy off. Nobody called 911. Some cheered. This is where we are now. And people better wake up soon because a great and terrible day is coming. I'm saying it. It's coming as sure as I'm talking right now. I am not God, and God has not told me when he's coming. He hasn't told anybody. He hasn't even told Jesus when he's coming and when he's going to bring this great and terrible day. But I guarantee you it's going to happen. And we see, the just continued downward spiral of society and some of these things that are taking place. And I just have to believe that God is not going to tolerate this for much longer.
No, you're right. Hey, I just want to jump in real quick and let everybody know that you are listening to Hotrod Paranormal Radio right here on WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York, and you are listening to my guest, Bill Bean, the spiritual warrior. I think you're right, Bill, and it's just sad. I know just another example, and we got to get back to some of this on your family house. And like I said, I got to have you back again because we got way too much to talk about.
Yeah, we're scratching the surface.
Oh my gosh, but that's even like common courtesy, and I've been out, and I'm old school. Heck, I'm old, so that's just the way I was raised. But
who we are.
And if you open a door for a total stranger going into a shopping store or whatever, and you're standing there. And I've had looks that people would look at me like, what are you, a creeper? What are you doing? You know, and I'm just being polite and like open the door for someone. And then they kind of look at you like you're up to something. It's like, no, I'm just being kind. I have no intention other than opening the door so you don't have to grab it. I'm walking out. But it's just weird how the society has changed.
It's sad. It's very, very sad. So what it's going to require is a gigantic leap of faith from people. And the only way that this leap of faith can take place is to turn back to God. And if a person is sincere, and that's what my fourth book is about now, called The Connection, you know, it is really a step-by-step guide on how to make God first and how to come back to Him. God never leaves us. We leave Him because He gave us free will. So we're free to do whatever we want to do. And unfortunately, you know, that can lead to some really bad choices. And so that's really what the book is about. It's a compilation. It starts out, the first half of the book is a compilation of everything that I've been through, you know, very condensed. I didn't want to get long-winded on it, but, you know, I talk about what we started out talking about, you know, the house and all the experiences there, and, you know, how my poor mother was attacked on a regular basis. And, you know, my dad left in 1975 when I was 9 years old. And then my mother came under regular physical attack from these demonic entities. And I too, you know, at the age of 5, I was suffering these physical attacks, and that lasted for many, many years. So, but my mother's suffering was far greater than anything that I had ever endured, and she suffered more than any other person I've ever seen. And it's miraculous that she lived as long as she did, and I think that it was by the power of God that she actually was around for as long as she was, because the amount of mental and spiritual and physical abuse that she sustained for that lengthy period of time is just really, when I look back on it, it just, I scratch my head, I shake my head. It's just really mind-boggling how somebody could endure all of that and still remain sane and really functional. And it's, you know, and another amazing thing that took place through it all was that she was very ill the entire time we lived in the house. You know, she had developed high blood pressure, which led to a series of strokes, which ultimately led to kidney failure. So she was very, very ill the entire time that we lived in the house. And I suffered from many illnesses as well. And I missed a lot of school as a child, would have these high fevers. And it always seemed like it would come on me after these attacks. I developed flu-like symptoms, the body aches and the high fevers and the sore throats and all these things. And so I missed a lot of school as a child. My brother did as well. And, you know, we never got proper rest. And after my dad left, he left us in such a horrible way that my mother had to go on welfare. You know, she couldn't work. She was sick. And so we had to go on welfare. And my dad never wasn't sending any money home or anything like that. He had moved to Florida. And so it was a titanic struggle, to say the least, just to, you know, not only deal with the spiritual aspect of things, you know, the things that we were enduring on a regular basis from these demonic entities, but we also had to deal with the fact of trying to live and survive on a daily basis on a very limited amount of money. And that was a great challenge. It added so much stress and pressure to my mother and my grandmother as well, because, you know, her mother, my grandmother, Dora Harvey, she was very close to us. And, you know, I was close to her than anybody else at that point in time. And she did everything that she could to help us, and she lived a mile away. And I truly believe the amount of stress and pressure, you know, from everything combined, including those demonic forces, greatly contributed to both of their deaths and other deaths in the family as well. But it was, and I could show you pictures that you would see. There were only maybe 2 pictures that I can recall where the family was happy and smiling. You know, the rest were very miserable looking pictures. And you could see the progression through the years, how this was wearing on everybody, especially my mother. And it was just, you had to truly understand what I'm saying. You would have had to have been there to see it for yourself on a regular basis, but just mind-boggling. And, today, here I am, this big, strong guy. I'm not afraid of anyone or anything, and it's the power of God that works through me to be able to drive demonic forces out of people, places, and things, and I praise him for that. But back then, as a child, if it were just my mom and I in the house, if she had to use the bathroom, I would sit outside the door until she came out. That's how bad it was. And some of those things that took place, would just take the stress and the trauma level to a whole new level. So when people suffer that kind of trauma, it creates those types of mind fractures to where, again, those demons are drawn right in because of the traumatic events taking place, and then the secretions that come out of the pineal gland and the adrenal glands as well. So it just draws them like a magnet.
Mm-hmm. And your poor mother, she was a very strong lady to endure all that activity. Even when she had that mild stroke, if I remember right, she had that mild stroke and you were there. Things were going wrong.
That was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, and you're back then. I don't even know I don't think we had the 911. You had to call the full number or run to.
I called my sister. Yeah, I called my sister when it happened, and she lived nearby, and she came and got her and took her to the hospital. Now, had I not called my sister, that could have been, she could have died, because she was really, she was out of her head at that time. She didn't even know who I was. She didn't, she called me by my brother's name, and so she was totally disoriented.
Yeah, I can't believe it. And then you were with your grandmother, so you and your brother went with your grandmother while your mom was, and she did make a recovery, other than having some other additional issues because of that. But she had gotten attacked shortly after that, had something thrown at her and had cut her head and everything. So, my goodness.
She'd, and again, there were several different entities in that house, and 4 I believe to be evil, and 1 I do believe to be divine, that came to my defense and her defense as well on several occasions. And what you're referring to is a night that she was attacked by one of these sinister demonic entities, and we call it the Undertaker. It was, this thing had a black suit on and looked like an Undertaker, and chalky white skin and black eyes and a black beard and black hair. And this thing came to her one night and was choking her. And this would happen to her quite often. And after the entity had vanished, she jumped out of bed struggling for breath and for air. And her idea was to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water. And she goes into the kitchen and opens the cupboard door, and an unseen force shot a glass out at her, like a projectile, just shot it out of the cupboard and struck her above the eye, knocking her unconscious. And she had to be taken to the hospital to get stitches and evaluated for concussion and all these things.
Man. Oh man. Well, I was wondering this, and I don't know what your thoughts on this, or if you've even been asked this, but when you were sick so much, and you said that you would have the flu-like symptoms and the sore throat and all that, do you think that was the evil, that presence that was overtaking you? Do you think that was, and it was leaving your body, and it was your body just expelling that, and it was just getting that nastiness out, but it was a residue left behind?
No question about it. And so again, this is another, and I'm glad you brought this up, because this is why it's so essential, one of the many reasons why it's so essential to have this strong connection with God. Because when we have a strong connection with God and we're making God first, then we come under his covering, and we're under his mighty shadow and under his covering and covered by his Son, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, his blood. So this is why it is so important. One of the reasons, again, one of the many reasons why it's so important to make God first. And we didn't have that type of structure. My parents believed in God, but we never practiced that, any religion. We'd never attended church as children. We were never baptized. So, yet through that all, John, I can remember as a little boy always having this blind faith. And I don't know why, because I didn't know the Bible. I'd never picked the Bible up, at that time. And I didn't know any scripture or anything, but I always knew that God was real. And I also remember as a child, I was standing in my bedroom one evening, and I would have to say it was probably, I don't know, it was late in the evening. It was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night. And I recall saying out loud, God, if you're real, make a horn blow. And I kid you not, as sure as I'm saying this to you, that a few seconds later, a car horn blew. And that was enough for me right there to never question God again. And so I always had this blind faith in God, and just absolutely amazing. So as much as we were immersed in this evil and negativity, through it all, God was there, and God was keeping us alive. And I feel that it was very much a Job-like experience in many aspects, to where, the devil went to God and said, look, I can make your good and faithful servant Job turn against you. And God allowed that and said, you can do anything you want, but you can't kill him. And that's pretty much what we were going through while enduring all of those things. However, I will say, again, just as I previously stated, I do believe that the years of torment, abuse, stress, pressure, and attacks greatly contributed to the deaths of my mother and my grandmother, and possibly others as well. So we finally were forced to leave in 1980 when we woke up one morning to the smell, just a pungent odor of burning wires. Everything in the home that was plugged into the wall had burned up. Major appliances, smaller appliances, everything. And also at this point in time, we had a priest involved. Now, my family and I are not Catholic, but my step-grandfather was, and he went to his church, and they sent a priest out, and he was involved for the last 16 months that we had lived there. And also at this point in time, my mother had a new man in her life, and he was very much like my dad, a man's man, a very rugged and tough individual. Wasn't afraid of anyone or anything, was a former boxer, but was physically attacked in the house many, many times. And he was terrified to be in there, but it was only his love for my mother that kept him, in the picture. Mm-hmm. So we ended up moving, and my brother and I didn't have any paranormal supernatural experiences while living in his home. However, he had revealed to me several years ago when I went to see him that my mother was still having those types of attacks and experiences while being there in his home with him. And so these things continued on her and within her up until her untimely death. So it wasn't long after moving out that these two tragedies occurred. First, my beloved grandmother, Dora Harvey, died from a sudden series of heart attacks at the age of 64. And then just 2 months, a little more than 2 months after that, my beloved mother, Patricia Bean, died from a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 44. And they were the two closest people to me in my life, and they were suddenly gone. And furthermore, about 6 months before that took place, I was staying at my grandmother's house, and on this one particular night, something woke me from my sleep, and I had this vivid vision of both my mother and grandmother dying. And I was so disturbed by it that I prayed to God and said, please take me, because I would not be able to endure, I wouldn't be able to bear it, without them. Mm-hmm. And of course, God had another plan, and I don't question him. He does what he does for a reason. Everything is for a reason. Obviously, he needed them in heaven, and I understand that. I accept that. However, did not accept that at the time. I was not mad at God, but I was very, very, one word would be devastated, another word would be totally empty, and then another word, and another way that I was living is, and was that I was just really didn't want to live anymore. And I wouldn't commit suicide. I wouldn't slice my wrist or take pills or anything like that, but I sure was praying that someone would just come and put a gun to my head and pull the trigger and end it all. I mean, that's how bad it was. And I lived my life on the edge for a long period of time, seeking death. Yet God had this plan for my life. So I truly believe that before I came into this world, God had this plan for my life. And it is unfolding as we speak, and I thank Him and praise Him for it. I could not be here where I am now and helping others had I not been there to suffer and to endure and to experience and to understand. So when I walk into someone's house now, as a deliverance minister, exorcist, whatever you want to call me, the spiritual warrior, whatever it is, when I walk in, people are comforted in the fact, in knowing that I have been there. So I could be the greatest scholar in the world, but if I've never had the experience or any experience, how in the world can they relate to me and me to them? You can't. There's no way to have that kind of connection. So this is why God does what He does. He takes people like me and He works through us because we have been down all the long and hard roads. So I'm grateful now. I'm thankful to God. And furthermore, it's a great thing to know what my purpose in life is. And there's nothing else for me, John. I could never see myself doing anything else. This is what God has called me to do, and I will continue to do it as long as He will have me to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, Bill, I always said this, and I always believe that we meet people in our life for a reason, either for a lesson, whether we get, someone that isn't so nice to us or treats us badly and we have to figure out a different way to better ourselves, or it's a person that guides us in our journey and where we need to be and where we, gravitate to. And I don't know, that's something that I've always believed in. And I think living a positive life in a negative world is very hard. It's not easy, but I think it does help. I know negative, if you're around someone negative and all that, that just drains your energy and that puts you at risk for, attacks of different things and bad outcomes. And so I'm not saying you're going to be zippity-doo-dah whistling down the sidewalk every day, but you have to have that mindset where, you know what, hey, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And you have to do that. And I think it really does help in getting away from negativity and negative people if you can. And I think it really does help change your life.
You're exactly right. And this is, through my writings, certainly to experience, and then translating that, into books. Through the writings, it's been a steady progression of me revealing my life and where I was and how I progressed through and where I'm at now. So it's essential that people know and realize and understand that, everybody suffers in one way or another. And I find that the people who have a bigger calling in life suffer the most. And no person is better than another, but God does choose people to have a bigger calling in life. And so what must happen also is when the person is, for me, after going through all those things and just being sick and tired of being sick and tired, if I was either going to get busy living or get busy dying, really. And I had an epiphany one day that I could do better and be better. And I decided to choose life, and I decided to make God first in my life. And when I did that, my whole life changed, and it was not an overnight process. It was 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. So it was a process, nevertheless. I had to change my mindset. So when people have these, horrible, traumatic experiences, we live in the fear-based, trauma-based way of thinking. And that becomes our life. That becomes our everyday routine. So we get into these patterns of saying, life sucks, and here's the latest, here's what happened today, and you expect bad things to happen. But when we truly decide to make God first, and when we truly break out of that mindset and take the gigantic leap into the unknown territory of faith, when I did that, my whole life changed and my thinking changed with it. So now, each and every day of my life, I declare victory in the new day. Each and every day of my life. Is my life perfect? No, but I'll tell you one thing. My life is very good, and my life is very blessed. And I know that if a situation comes forward, that God is going to be there, and that God is with me, and God is for me. And if God is with us and for us, then nothing can stand against us. So I expect good things to happen in my life. I live in the positive. I live on high frequency and high vibration. And that's what I want for other people. So this is why I have shared my story. This is why I've written the books. This is why God has chosen me as a warrior for him to help other people out of these shackles and chains. And it's been just an amazing journey. I'm so grateful and so thankful to God for this. And I just look forward to the things that are coming. And so I'm very excited about this latest book, which is called The Connection. And I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to stay too long on it, but maybe the next time I come back, we'll really dig into it. But again, The Connection is a compilation of the first 3 books, but then by mid-book, it's all about building your faith and changing your mindset. And I give step-by-step instruction with some very powerful prayers on how you can call out to God, make him first, keep him first, and walk in what I call warrior mode, which is faith, strength, and courage. I refuse to lose, John, because, again, I know that God is with me and God is for me, and I praise him for it. So I know we're getting close to the end here. I want to thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to the next time. We've just scratched the surface here. We've got a lot more to talk about, but thank you, and thank you, Cindy, and very much look forward to the next time. And I want to say real quick that I'm going to be, I just made an appearance in Maryland this past Friday night, and it was wonderful. I want to thank everybody out there for the ones that did attend, and some people drove long distances to come see me, and it was just very surprising, and it was great, just wonderful. It was a blessing. But on March 10th, I'm going to be appearing in Brewster, New York. And for anyone that's in the area, I will have the information posted on my website. And if you're in the area and you'd like to come by and meet me or get a copy of my new book, The Connection, please do so. And I'll also be praying for people there and having private sessions with people as well. So, again, John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I think he's gone.
I'm right.
I don't know.
Nope, I'm right here.
Oh, okay, all right.
And I wanted to tell you that we wanted to, we were going to talk more about your books, your Dark Force, 10 Steps to Victory, Dark Force 2, The Delivered, absolutely your newest book, The Connection. So we got a lot more things to talk about, more different things that you're about, and your positive lectures and different things that you do. And so definitely we're going to talk off the air. So hang on. We're going to try to schedule something. And I just want to thank everybody for listening on all the apps. Wherever you're listening from, don't forget to download the shows, follow and comment. Let me know what you think, or how who you'd like to try to get on for me to talk to at some point. And I want to thank everyone in the chat room as well, CJ, Dita, and Paul. And my next week's guest will be February 14th, will be the return of Bud Steed for a part 2 episode of his books and the accounts of paranormal. So thank you very much once again, Bill, for coming on, and really appreciate it. And like I said, like I always say, don't dream it, drive it.
Go, go!